this is for class 10, that is control and coordination. Control and coordination. This deals with our central nervous system. This deals with our central nervous system. This deals with our central nervous system. Why I have selected this chapter? Because it is an interesting chapter. So here your this is the because it deals with central nervous system, that is the brain and the spinal cord and this is an interesting chapter. See here, let us first discuss about nerve cells. Nerve cell, that is a neuron. Its structure is somewhat like this, somewhat star-type body, cell body, star-type cell body with dendrites. These are the dendrites which receives the message. These are the dendrites which receives the message. Dendrites which receives the message, and then here this is somewhat like this, and this is the nucleus, and here is somewhat nerves ending, somewhat like this, nerves ending. So this is your cell body, this is your axon, and this is nerve ending, and here there is a gap between two neurons. This gap is called synapses. S-Y-N-A-P-S-E. Synapse. This gap is called synapse. So this is the structure of a nerve cells, that means neurons. It has two functions. It carries the message to the brain, and again it brings the message to your muscle cells or muscle tissues. So here our sense organs, here they receive the message, and it by the help of the nerve cells it moves to the brain, and from the brain the message is sent back to the muscle cells. So muscle cells, or you can say muscle tissues. So here what happens, one is that is the gustatory. They detects the taste, and another is olfactory. They detects the smell. Now what happens here? A message is received by these dendrites. This message is received by these dendrites, and there is some chemical reaction, and which is converted into electrical signal. There is some chemical reactions here, dendrites. There is some chemical reaction, and this message, chemical reaction, is converted into electrical signals, and these electrical signals moves to the cell body, to the axon, to the nerve ending, and here again this electrical signals they are converted to chemicals. They are converted to chemicals, and this chemical moves to the second dendrite, and again the same process, electrical signal, and it comes to the nerve center, and again to crossing the synapses, they move to another nerve cells. In this way, the message is being transmitted. So this is the nerve cells. So before explaining about the central nervous system, that is the brain or the spinal cord, So before explaining about the brain or the spinal cord, we must know about the nerve cell, which is called as neuron. We must know about this. So this is the structure of a nerve cell and how the message is carried on. So this basic first you must learn. The most interesting part here is that your reflex arc. The most interesting part is your reflex arc. This is the most important point here, is your reflex arc. Here we see. Here is your reflex arc. That means your reflex activity. You can say, or you can say your reflex activity. Reflex activity. About your reflex arc. So this is an interesting feature. Suppose you keep your hand, suppose you bring your hand near a fire. Now what happens? The message by the nerve cells, it will reach to the brain, that is your forebrain, where thinking is done. Forebrain, where your thinking is done. Thinking is done. So, when you keep your, suppose when you keep your hand near a fire, what happens? The message, it goes to the forebrain where thinking is done. And thinking process, it is a complex process. Thinking process. This is a complex process. It is a complex process. Here, all the data already present and all the data they have received, the brain, forebrain integrates it. It integrates it and then send the message to the muscles. Then it send the muscle the information to the muscle cells. Muscle cells or tissue. And after that you remove your hand. So what happens? The time taken, when the time taken by the message to reach the forebrain, and the forebrain then integrates it and it sends the message to the muscle cells or the muscle tissue or tissues, and after that you remove your hand. So in this time interval, what happens? Your hand will get burned. Your hand will get burned. So this is the main important interesting fact here is that the reflex are for the reflex activity. What happens? Suppose if you keep your hand near any hot object, or if you touch a hot glass of water, uh, the message, that means the sensor neuron will receive the message and it will send it to the forebrain, where the thinking is done, and thinking process is a complex process. It collects the informations and the information already stored there, and then integrate it, and it sends the informations to the muscles, that is, it sends the information, that is motor neurons. It sends the information through motor neurons to your muscle tissues. So this requires a time, and in between this, it requires a time, and what will happen, that the time you remove your hand, your hand will get burned. So this immediate removal of your hand is done by the spinal cord. The immediate removal of your hand is done by the spinal cord. That is, there is no thinking. There is no thinking process. Here there is no thinking process. That means the time you touch an hot object, your hand gets immediately removed, and this is the reflex arc which is done by the spinal cord. And what happens, that your hand is saved. So see, thinking, that means the brain in human being, this is the main part, thinking, the forebrain, which we can think, and this is done in the forebrain, where it is a complex process, no doubt. The informations which are already stored and the informations they receive, they integrate it and give you the result, and that result by the motor neurons it reaches your muscle cells, and then you either remove your hand. But this reflex arc, which is done by the spinal cord, this reflex arc, this eliminates the thinking part, so immediately your hand is removed, and later on, no doubt, it is the message is sent to the brain, and after some time you will come to know that it was a hot object. So this is an important part in this control and coordination. Now, I have already told you that your central nervous system, it consists of brain and the spinal cord, and the communication between the muscles and the communication between the brain and the other parts of the body, and the other parts of the body is done by the peripheral nervous system, is done by the peripheral, most probably, is done by the peripheral nervous system, For brain, it is done by cranial nerves. It is done by cranial nerves, peripheral nervous system. For brain, it is done by cranial nerves, and for the spinal nerves for your spinal cord, for your spinal cord. So communication between the brain and the other part of the system is done by the peripheral nervous system. For brain, it is the cranial nerve, and spinal nerves for the spinal cord. So in a nutshell, in your textbook, it has tried to explain you how the activities are controlled, how the muscles tissues are controlled. Here they have told you in a nutshell. Now there are two types of movement. One is the voluntary movement, and another is the involuntary movement. Voluntary movement. The involuntary movement is controlled by the midbrain. It is controlled by the midbrain and the hindbrain. It is controlled by the midbrain and the hindbrain. That means involuntary movement, such as your salivation, your vomitings, your your heartbeats. All these are involuntary activities, and it is controlled by the midbrain and the hindbrain. Now, balancing, walking, riding a bicycle, this is done by the hindbrain. This is done by the walking, that is walking, riding a cycle. This is done by the hindbrain. And that part is the cerebellum. Cerebellum. That is done by the cerebellum. So everything, it has been given to you in a nutshell. Now, control and coordination, it is also done by the hormones. It is also done by the hormones. Control and coordination. Hormones, it also helps in control and coordination. Let us take an example, that is let us take an example. Adrenaline. This adrenaline hormones, it is secreted from adrenal gland. It is secreted from adrenal. So here, see, this is an interesting fact. What does this hormones do? It mainly targets your heart. It targets your heart. So what happens, that is adrenaline, this is a hormone which is secreted by the adrenal gland, and its main target is your heart. So suppose Suppose a deer sees a suppose a deer is in front of a tiger. Front of a tiger. Suppose a deer is in front of a tiger. What will happen? The adrenal gland will secrete adrenaline and it will target the heart. So your heartbeat increases. Your heartbeat increases. Your heartbeat increases. So when your heartbeat increases, more oxygen is pumping. More oxygen is pumping. So more oxygen is pumping, that means you are getting more energy. More energy. At the same time, less blood flows through the digestive system. Through the digestive system and skin. Most of the blood flows to the skeletal muscles. Most of the blood flows to skeletal muscles. Most of the blood flows to skeletal muscles. So what happens? That means the deer gets maximum energy and it can run fast. It can run faster than tiger to save himself. So this is the purpose of adrenaline. So it is very interesting. See here, control and coordination, it is also done by the by hormones, and these hormones, they are directly secreted to the bloodstream. The gland directly secreted to the bloodstream, and it moves through the bloodstreams. It is directly injected into the bloodstreams. So here, this adrenal, which is secreted by the adrenal gland, its main target is your heart. Suppose I am taking an example, a deer is in front of a tiger. So adrenal hormones will be secreted, the heartbeat will increase, more oxygen is pumping, more energy, less blood flows through the digestive system and skin, most of the blood flows to the skeletal muscles, and now it gets maximum energy and to the muscles, and the deer can run faster than the tiger to save this life. So there are also other types of hormones which are secreted in our body. Now another example, suppose if the sugar level increases in our blood, if the sugar level increases in our blood, then the pancreas immediately secretes insulin to balance the sugar level. Similarly, thyroxine let me check. Similarly, thyroxine, it is secreted by thyroid gland. It is secreted by thyroid gland, and for the formation of thyroxine, common salt is very necessary. For the synthesis of thyroxine, common salt is very necessary. So there are also other types of hormones, but these are the main hormones which are secreted in our body. And what is the most important feature is that it is directly injected into the blood. So this is all about your human of your human body. Now let us take the control and coordination of a plant. So controlling hormones are also secreted in plants like the auxin. It is formed at the shoot tips of the a plant, formed at the shoot tips of the plant. So when the what happens, this thyroxine, this auxin, what happens, this auxin, it moves to the shaded part of the plant, it moves to the shaded part of the plant, and where thyroxine is accumulated, and this accumulated thyroxine, it helps in the growth, it bends the plants towards the sunlight, So similarly there are other plant hormones, that is cytokinins, gibberellins, abscisic acids, they perform different types of work. But I have selected this auxin because it is interesting. What happens in auxin? It helps in the growth, and it is formed at the shoot tips of the plant. And this auxin, it moves to the shaded part of the plant where auxin is synthesized, and due to the accumulation of the auxin, it bends the plants towards the sunlight. So there are also some topics here, that is the plant movement, phototropism, that means movement towards light, then again movement towards gravity, movement towards chemicals. There are also given in your book, but I have dealt with the most interesting part to make you the topic interesting. So this is all about your control and coordination.